in the Wake of Hate. This is episode 3. We are back with 3 of our series with author Michael Ruskin of The Vow, A Love Story and the Holocaust. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about his journey of discovering his parents' story in writing his book. So, Michael, if you could give us a little bit more insight into how that process went. I know we ended the last time on a note of you finding things when your parents had passed and really getting a better understanding of their story. But I know there was a lot more to that process of researching and writing the book.
Yes, certainly. And I'll tell you something, Sandra, when I thought about it this morning, I got to know my parents actually better or knew their story better after they were gone. Because as you know, in my previous episodes, they really didn't speak about their experiences all that much. So I'm going to have to take you back to 1993 when I found the documents in my father's condominium. And those documents were testimonies that my parents gave to the German government in 1964. And it was only the finding of those documents that gave me the foundation to write the book. Honestly, if it wasn't for those documents, I don't think this book would have been written. So when I found the documents in 93, it was only years later that I started thinking about writing the book. You know, when I was thinking about, again, this morning, I don't know what really got me to start writing the book in 2016, 17. I know my brother had passed in 2008, which made me the last surviving member of my immediate family. And I knew if I didn't tell their story, it would just go into the ether. They wouldn't have known the incredible lives they lived and the miracles that they experienced. So anyway, when I started writing the book, I realized there was a lot I had to do to fill in a lot of the information that I received from the documents. So the first thing I did was contact my cousin in Israel, in Tel Aviv. This was my mom's sister's daughter. And now, again, I want to let the audience know that through the Holocaust that my parents experienced, Sarah, which was my mom's sister, was with her through the entire experience from the time they were in the Lithuanian ghetto to the time they went into the concentration camp. And in my mother's case, it was in Stutthof, which is in northern Poland. So my cousin was very informative. She gave me a lot of information, including photos, which is in my book. And she filled in some of the blanks that my parents never spoke about. So that was my starting point. Then after that, I found a researcher from South Africa whose specialty was researching the Baltic countries during World War II. And he also provided me with a lot of information about my father, who I found out had a couple of relatives that I didn't even know about until this gentleman told me. And I found out that I had a cousin in New Jersey and a cousin in San Diego, California. I didn't know my father had any relatives, but he connected me with them, and it was just incredible. I had a chance to speak to people I never even knew until I met this researcher. So that was quite an experience just from that. So I had those two areas that were now starting to be filled in from the information they provided. And again, I got a lot of this also from, it's not ancestry.com. It's kind of a Jewish ancestry.com. And they also provided me with information from Lithuania. They specialized in the Baltic again. And so some of the information I got was from this, what I call, it was called Jewish Generations. And they also gave me information. I found out a lot about my grandmother on my father's side and my aunt on my father's side. So, and I found out where they lived and how they were taken. So that was also an important piece. And then, of course, I contacted the Holocaust Museum, who provided me with a number of photographs and also filled in a lot of the information about my parents. And then I contacted the Yad Vashem website, the World Remembrance Center in Jerusalem, that also gave me a lot of information. I mean, so I had to pull all this information together, and it was not an easy tie-in. I had to fill in the blanks, and then when I decided that I was ready, I started the manuscript. And I think I spoke about this in a previous episode. A lot of the information I got was when I started writing the book. And as I said, I found the energy in my room that actually was feeding me information I didn't know anything about. And I knew later on it was my parents. And I talked about this with my fingers racing across the keyboard, and information and experiences that they experienced I didn't even know about. All I knew that I was just following my fingers, and it turned out to be like an incredible story. So when people ask me, how did you know? Well, my parents never spoke about this. I mean, I knew I had a sister who passed, and I knew about my parents being in separate concentration camps, and a couple of tidbits of information my mom gave me through the years. But a lot of this information came to me while I was writing this book, and I spoke to a couple authors over the years, and they told me they had the same experience. There was an energy about them that filling their head with this information, and that's how they got to write the books. So I'm not the first one to say this, I'm sure.
That's absolutely amazing. And so how long did this process of connecting with people and researching to find more information take you?
It took me about 2 years. And I want to also now move on to the next phase, which was getting a person to actually publish. Well, I'm self-published, but actually getting involved in printing the book and getting a book designer to design the illustrations in the book and to arrange all the photographs in the book. That was also a big piece of why my book is so successful. The person who designed the book did an incredible job. So I had to pull that stuff together as well. And then I had 3 proofreaders that read the book. It's a long process. And I'll tell you, you've got to be driven, and you've got to have a lot of passion to write the book, because it's a daunting task when you're pulling all this information. You want your audience to know as much information as I could give them about my parents.
Right. And how long was the process of actually writing the manuscript?
About a little bit over a year, 12 months, 16 months. And believe me, and you know this, I have a tendency of revising a lot of information. I write it down and then I go back 5 times and I revise it. So I try to make it as readable as possible. So that can be frustrating. I think I got it right, and then I find, I want to make some changes. So I end up making changes. But it took me about a little bit over a year. And then, of course, you got the fact that I'm self-published means that I have to promote. And that was another piece, because I wanted to self-publish the book. I just felt a better connection with the book if I had total control. So that was also a piece that I wasn't prepared for. The promoting the book myself takes a lot of work. And you know this yourself because you're my partner.
I do.
You know. So, but I mean, as I look back, and as I said before, the compliments I'm getting from my audience, how much they're thankful that I wrote the book. It's opened up the eyes to a lot of people who knew very little about the Holocaust until I wrote the book. And to give them the information through my parents was quite eye-opening to a lot of people who have read the book, and also has gone to my website. So yeah.
How was the experience for you, the process of the researching and the writing? Do you feel like it's been an impactful experience for you to go through all of that?
Yeah, well, it gave me insights to the way I was raised and why my parents raised me the way they did and how I turned out. As I said in my previous episodes, I mean, if I would have known what they had gone through, the sacrifices they made for my brother and myself, I would have been so much more appreciative and so much more caring and loving towards them for what they had gone through. Because, as I said, they spoke very little about their past. They just repressed a lot of that information. But it made me realize their resilience, and they made me realize the importance of loving myself, which because they were very controlling and not very demonstrative with their feelings. And so as a child, that's a hard thing to get over because you're not getting a lot of positive strokes. So I had to learn to do this myself. So basically, but as I said before, I mean, they did an incredible job being parents. They were great providers. And the way they showed love was by being very protective. And honestly, if I had been in their shoes, I probably would have been exactly the same way.
It sounds like this has been a very healing process for you. And from what I understand, some of your feedback from others that have been through similar experiences and people that you've gotten to speak with at presentations have kind of had the same experience in reading the book and hearing the story, that it's been very healing for them to experience as well.
That is very true. And also, a lot of this also comes from Silent Legacy, our Facebook group. Reading their stories and the similarities that we share is just incredible. Some of them had different experiences. Many of them had experiences like mine that they weren't really, their parents were shut down. And as a child, that's very tough. And you have to reprogram yourself and work on yourself. That you have to be a parent to yourself. And so that's what makes Silent Legacy so important. It brings our community together, and there's strength in the fact that we can share those stories together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's something to be said for realizing that you aren't alone and that your experience was not something that's necessarily unique to you or wrong or different about your family. It's a larger experience that a lot of people have gone through.
Right. It's like family. That's exactly what it is. As you know, I don't have family, and they basically are family to me. And I'm sure that the Silent Legacy Facebook page is giving that kind of connection. And I'm glad we have it.
I think so too. I think that it's been very good for people so far to be able to come in and share their stories and not only talk about what they know about their family and the experience that their family had, particularly in the Holocaust, but to be able to talk to others about their own experience of growing up as children or relatives of survivors and what that does, which is entirely why we are here doing this show, is to really discuss and bring to light those ripple effects that come from events like this and how it spreads out through generations and communities. And I think that that's the importance of our message here and of the community that we're building within Silent Legacy, is embracing and in some ways repairing a lot of that.
Well, I agree. And also another important factor is I hope they share this with their children. The fact that I don't have kids, I think it's important to give their children this information so they understand the history of what happened during the Holocaust, and also give a new appreciation for their parents, for what they went through with their parents. So I'm just hoping this gets passed down to the next generation. I'm sure it will.
Absolutely. I think there is a huge importance in making sure that we pass on, not only the lessons of the past, but the ways that people are learning to heal themselves. I think it's very important to go through that process of really healing generational trauma. And it isn't something that can just stop with yourself. When you've done the work to heal yourself and to move past things, particularly if you have children or even just younger relatives, nieces, nephews, it is very important for them to understand that process and to understand how to continue breaking those cycles and healing that trauma moving forward.
I agree. And it's really interesting. I think the lessons I learned from my parents were unintentional because they didn't give me the kind of love that many children get. Outward love. They showed love in other ways. I had to learn to love myself. And that was not something that they had planned. So it was unintentional of their part for being unable to provide me with the caring and the love and also the respect of letting me speak, that I had to do that by myself. So that's a growing experience that I would not have had if they raised me in a different way. It's kind of an unusual way to say it, but the fact that what they didn't give me is what I learned.
And I think that learning to love yourself and find your voice is a process that a lot of people have experienced. And a lot of people have gone through coming out of a difficult childhood for one reason or another and needing to do the work to be able to heal and move past some of those difficulties and find their voice, and then hopefully go on to share that with others. And I think that that's just another layer to this process of what we're doing here with this show and talking about how those things spread spread out and impact people on a larger scale. And it's up to all of us to not only do the work individually, but to help spread that love and help other people learn how to heal and how to stand up and find their voice and the good that can come from finding your voice and sharing your story.
Right. And also the fact that it doesn't end. As long as I'm on this planet, I'm still learning how to be the best I can be. And so just because you get to a certain point doesn't mean that you stop learning. It continues on. And on the other side, what you said is true. I have my own, what I call a spiritual group that gets together twice a month. And we talk about things like this. And it's really a great feeling to know you can connect on that level with people that understand you. And the children of Holocaust survivors are very unique. I mean, in many cases, they were raised not like regular kids. They came from families that came from very traumatic experiences. Many of them carried that with them. Many of them repressed those experiences. But my parents did live productive lives the best they could. And I have such respect for my parents for what they did. And as I said before, I wish I could have showed them how much I appreciate them and love them for what they gave my brother and myself. And the book is one of the reasons I wrote the book.
Absolutely. And I was just about to say, I feel like that's something that they know now. I think they were very much with you through your process of writing the book. And I think that having their story and their legacy out there for others to read and learn from is one of the best ways that you could have ever shown them, how much love and respect you have for them. And to be able to spread that message and have others be able to read the book. So I think that that's kind of a perfect segue into one of the other questions I had for you about the process of writing the book. It's a Holocaust survival story. It's a love story, and it's beautiful on face value for that reason, for the historical value, for the understanding of what people went through, for the insight into what helped survivors make it through. But there is a larger message there. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to put into words what you feel like the larger message of their story is.
A lot of it is the resilience they had, the faith they had, the love they had for each other. And most importantly, I think one of the major reasons they were able to survive was because they had hope that they'd be together. And I say that in the book, and I mentioned this right up front, that this is a spiritual book, and that you have the strength within yourself to get the answers by going within and knowing that God loves you and that He will guide you. And this book has given me incredible purpose. And I really believe that with the number of years I still have left, I'm here to make sure that people understand that. So I would say that the overall lesson I got was the connection I have with the inner spirit of myself, and that I will go forward with knowing that I have the power and the insight to get through anything by going within for the answers. And of course, self-love is one of those things. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for me, and I read the book cover to cover when I sat down to read it, I thought, actually remember very vividly, it was kind of a rainy day and I had just gotten it in the mail from you a couple of days before that. And I thought, well, I'll sit down and, read a couple chapters of this. And I did not move until I finished the book. I sat curled up in a chair and read it cover to cover in one day. And it's that compelling and just engrossing of a story. You don't want to put it down because you want to know what happens next. And you have an understanding from the beginning of the book that they did survive and that they were able to find each other. But somehow that doesn't take away from wanting to continue to read the story and learn how they found their way back to one another and how the story sort of comes full circle. And It is an absolutely beautiful story about faith and hope and love and perseverance and really just the incredible strength that both of them had. And I think that it honestly just surpasses all the boundaries of any of the topics within it. I think that it would be easy to consider it a love story or even a historical account, but it is so much more than that. And I think for me, me, that's the importance of being able to bring your story to a larger audience, and eventually the stories of other people who have survived different accounts, and also, other children and descendants of Holocaust survivors who have their own stories of how their family was able to make it through and what they dealt with in the aftermath of that. I think that there are really important factors to everyone understanding the history, because obviously being able to understand the history means that we're less likely to have things like that happen again. So it's very important for, current generation kids who are becoming adults right now to understand and embrace these stories, but not just for the historical value, also for them to really understand what people have gone through to be able to make it to where they are now, and the things that we need to make sure that as a society, as a global culture, we don't allow to be repeated.
I totally agree. And I'll tell you, one part in their story about when they were put into separate concentration camps, and they didn't see each other for almost a year, not knowing if the other was still alive. And as I said, if they didn't have the faith within themselves and had a compelling future to continue to live together and live a life together, I don't know if they would have made it, honestly, because a lot of people gave up. I think in Viktor Frankl's book, he mentions something about if you don't stay positive within 24 to 48 hours or something like that, they usually die within like a couple days after that. You've got to stay positive, and that's one of the reasons why the people who did survive had this feeling like we're going to make it through, and we're not going to let this take us over. And that's exactly what my parents did. And I think a lot of people, and you've got to remember also that my sister was taken only 3 months prior to the time they went into the camps. I mean, it's a miraculous story that is just beyond belief for me. In fact, I think part of the book is a love beyond one's imagination. They had an incredible love for each other. And as I said, it's like when you suffer together, it brings you closer together. And I think that's what happened.
Absolutely. And you touched on something there. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, is one of my all-time favorite books. And I think one of the most well-known quotes from that book is one of the most provocative quotes, and I'm going to probably not have it word for word here, but the idea that when everything is stripped away, the last of man's freedoms that exists is the ability to choose the way you see things. That has stuck with me. I read that book probably in my late 20s the first time. And that has stuck with me throughout my life when I've been in any difficult situation, that you always have the ability to adjust how you see things and realize that someone who was in the position that he was in was able to see that and embrace that and try to change his perspective on what he was going through in a concentration camp. It just is such an impactful idea to think that someone could be in such a dire situation and say, I'm going to shift how I look at this, and I'm going to decide that this is an opportunity for me to, have more faith and embrace my strength of my spirit. It's unfathomable to be able to be in that situation and have that strength. That I think that obviously that's something that both of your parents had. And I think it speaks volumes, and it's got to be, a particular, not only character trait that someone has, but it also has to have a lot to do with their own foundation, right? With their own parents, their own family, their own upbringing, that they had that strong of a will and faith that strong, that they were able to embrace that even in a situation that seemed completely and utterly hopeless.
Right. It really comes down to perception, what they perceive at the time. Perception is big. You could either look at it in a very negative way, or it's the way you couch things, the way you see things. And if your perception is you'll make it through, you'll do it, and you will. But a lot of people come from a place of fear, place of anger, and they end up taking a different road. And sometimes that does not end up in the right place or a good place.
Yes,
So
absolutely, absolutely. And again, one of the reasons for being able to have these conversations and share these stories is for people to understand that you can be in that difficult of a situation and take something positive away from it and choose to see it in a different light, and choose to believe that it isn't hopeless, and to believe that you can, still find a way and continue to endure. And I think that there are so many people out there that need that message. A lot of things going on globally right now that are causing people to feel hopeless. And I think that being able to hear and understand and embrace stories of people who have been through just absolutely unthinkable things and been able to survive and persevere and, go on to build another life and a better life. It's really important for people right now to be able to have that message.
what's also very unique, Sandra, is the fact that the people who come on to the channel will be the children who can tell the inside stories that they got from their parents, if they were fortunate enough that their parents gave them that insight. These will be stories that you will normally not find in books. When these children of survivors come on the channel and talk about what they were told by their parents, it will be very unique for the audience to hear their stories, as I'm talking about my parents' story. And I'm sure there's a lot of incredible stories to be heard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do 100% feel like we are kind of at the beginning of something that could be very healing and very beneficial for a lot of people. So I'm very much looking forward to more chats with you, and with being able to open up our audience to join us and also have these conversations.
I definitely agree with you totally. I think people will learn a lot from what they're going to hear. And of course, the children themselves will probably be able to talk about their family and their experiences for the first time in some instances, when they can talk about the way they were raised. As you say, the name of the Facebook group is Silent Legacy, and they no longer have to be silent. And now they can express
Absolutely.
themselves on this channel, which is going to be really interesting.
Absolutely. And just for viewers, the reason that we chose the name Silent Legacy for our Facebook group, which is a group for originally established for children of Holocaust survivors and then expanded to descendants of Holocaust survivors. And we've also begun accepting some allies and people that want to be part of the community for historical value, and who have other things to add to the community. But the reason that we chose the name of Silent Legacy is because so many of these children and relatives of Holocaust survivors grew up either not knowing at all until they were much older and not really understanding their parents, or having just sort of surface level knowledge that their parents and relatives were Holocaust survivors without really having the whole story and without having the real depth of understanding that they needed to be able to process, the way things were done within their family. And understandably, so many of these survivors were very emotionally closed off, very protective, very cautious about, who they interacted with and how they did things. And it has an impact on those around them. And I think that name of Silent Legacy is really embracing the fact that there is this legacy there to be carried on, both from the history of the family and from the experience of growing up in that environment. But it's a legacy that was expected to be kept silent. And there's now, the ability within this community and moving forward on our channel here to be able to bring those things to light, and to have them not be kept silent anymore, and bring them out in an ability to heal them and in an ability to teach and educate others and spread that message that faith and love and hope are able to conquer so much.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to tell you that I never spoke. Growing up, I never spoke about my parents' experiences. I never spoke about how I was raised. It was only through this book that I was able to really express myself, and I could also talk about what happened to my parents. I mean, growing up, playing baseball when you were a kid and hanging around the neighborhood, this topic was never brought up. My friends knew I came from parents who were refugees and they were Holocaust survivors, but it ended right there. We never went beyond that. We just didn't talk about it. So it wasn't until this book was written that I was able to really express who I am and what happened to my parents. My friends didn't know a lot of this, friends I grew up with, until I wrote this book back, many, many years ago.
And I know that you are the last of your immediate family, but you were able to find some extended family. Were they able to get some value out of being able to have the story as well?
Well, I sent them the book after I met them. They're both in their late 80s. I mean, they're not young anymore, 90s. One I couldn't reach. I guess she was already in a nursing home. The other one did get back to me, and she said to me when she was over at my house when I was very, very young, she said she met me. I don't even remember. And she said that during the Passover dinner, she did say that she did bring up my sister to her, not to me. When we spoke, when my cousin and I spoke, she did say that she knew about that part of the book, but there's a lot there that she did not know about until I wrote the book. And again, a lot of this information came from places like, as I said before, from my cousin in Israel and also from the researcher and Yad Vashem and the Holocaust Museum. So it was truly an incredible journey as I pulled all this information together. It was just absolutely incredible. I didn't know. So, and it's giving me an incredible amount of energy and purpose. And I think that my parents are right with me now. And I still got a long way to go to get their story. I'd like to get this around the world. So got a long way to go.
Absolutely. Well, and I think we're taking more steps in that daily. And I really, really appreciate you participating in this and getting your story out there, talking about, what it was like growing up and the process of writing the book. I think that having that insight into you as a person and the extension of the story within the book will be really good for people to be able to kind of embrace the whole picture. So I really, really appreciate you joining me to start putting this show together.
Thank you, Sandra. It's really been very insightful and very healing too. So yeah, it was great.
Well, I think that concludes our show for today. And I look forward to bringing our exciting news for what we're doing with next season to you guys very shortly.
Great. That's great.